Once again, it was when I heard about this opportunity, I was like, yo, this is going to be a special session because I am honored and extremely elated to have someone of great strength, poise, tenure here at Howard University. I could go on and on, but we got just a little bit of time to be in the Queen's presence. So I'm gonna make the introduction quite short because she told me it's just goes by one name. She's been working her entire career to go by one name of Omarosa, but she is a professor, a reverend, entertainer, an author, a lecturer, so many different things from all fields of journalism, politics, entertainment. And it is truly a privilege to sit down with you and discuss many things, but specifically your New York Times best-selling book, Unhinged.
Thank you.
It is a pleasure, Miss Omarosa. How you doing?
I'm great, and I'm also excited to be back on the yard.
Yeah, alumni.
Founders.
Yeah.
I started at Howard University in 1997.
Wow, and that's where you got your master's here.
Got my master's, finished all of my coursework for my doctorate, and 3 weeks before I was to defend my dissertation, I went to go and tape The Apprentice.
Wow.
Which my mother never lets me forget.
Really? Wow. So, I mean, you still got a little time, like, might as well
I'm
just.
still working it out.
Yeah. I was like, you here. Let's get it in.
Yeah.
But honestly, I have to say, I mean, we've crossed paths before, and really just short in passing, but I've always had great respect and reverence for all that you do. And then getting the opportunity to read your book, it kind of puts it all into perspective. And I want to be one of the first to say is that, and you talk about this in your book, you've been portrayed as the supervillain since most of the world was introduced to you, but your strength and your ability, even in a space of reality television, which is often not taken seriously, you've done some remarkable things on and off camera, and it should be celebrated and appreciated, and that's really what I want to dive into in this conversation. I mean, really just, and you made one of these statements in your book, and we like to put big headlines here on Cannon's class, but you made a statement about talking about the difference of being portrayed as a strong black woman opposed to an angry black woman.
Yes.
And I feel like you've dealt with that quite a bit in the public more than most. And then obviously, I'd be remiss to even mention, all of the work that you've done in the White House. Even prior to our current president, before reading your book, I wasn't even really that well versed. I remember seeing you on The Apprentice, and they said you were into politics and stuff, but I didn't know that you were actually a political aide in the White House.
Yeah, my first job out of Howard when I got my master's was to go work for Gore in the White House.
Right, so. And it was right prior to 9/11, right?
That's right. Mm-hmm.
And you touch on that in the book as well. So if anyone hasn't read the book, and that's one of the purposes of Cannon's class is to kind of offer up an appetizer for a lot of our audience who may not always get an opportunity to have the time or energy to read an entire book. We touch on some things.
But we have some things in common. You grew up in public housing.
Yes. And so did you in Ohio, correct?
In gangs.
Yeah,
yes, my brother, unfortunately, he was a blood. He died. He was
right.
killed about 10 years ago.
I'm sorry.
But we
sorry
have some things that are in common that explain how we have the tenacity
right.
to continue in an industry that is not kind to little black boys and girls.
Right, truly, and you've done it so well, and that's why I just encourage so many people to just check out the book. You got an audio book too for like all of that, but
the paperback is coming
but it's
out.
so interesting. And I mean, like I said, I know we don't have a lot of time, so I just want to dive in. But ultimately, before I get to my hard questions, just just even talking about that strength of a black woman and how it's perceived in the public and in the media, that it can easily be turned into, oh, she's angry or, oh, she's loud. How have you dealt with that, and how have you overcome that?
Well, first of all, my HBCU education prepared me for being the only one.
Right.
In most circumstances. I went to undergrad at Central State. Of course, I went to Howard. And then, of course, I went to Payne Theological for my seminary. So I've been educated at only black colleges. But I was prepared by incredible professors and mentors for what the world was going to present for us. One, when I left Howard, I was surrounded where I was the only woman in the room, and I knew that if I didn't say things in a certain way, if I didn't express myself in a very gentile way, then people's perception would be that of someone who was being too aggressive or too outspoken. And I'm not the only one who goes through this. I'm sure that there is tons of women who are watching at home who know what it's like to be in a room where people misunderstand your strength and they want to characterize it in such a derogatory way.
Right.
But I've never allowed other people to define me. Every single time they try to define me, I make it very clear who I am and what I stand for. If you do not define for yourself who you are and what you advocate and what you fight for, then the world will successfully put labels on you.
Right.
And I've never allowed them to do that.
Right. And now, so in being in reality television, political realm, and even, knowing that I say the media is a facade. Mm-hmm. And you have to understand how to manipulate the media and not let the media manipulate you. I feel like you've done a fine job of, even in times where it's blatant that they've tried to manipulate your statements or even your approach, that you've overcome that and still gotten across the statements that you want to make. Mm-hmm. How'd you do that? How? That's the secret. What's the secret?
Well, there's power in code switching, first of all.
Oh, okay.
And being able to go into circumstances and understand that the onus of effective communication is on you.
Right.
It's not on the listener. You have to effectively communicate to whatever audience is listening to you.
Right.
And so if you watch me on cable news, then I communicate to an audience and I have to effectively deliver a message to them.
In a short amount of time.
In a very short amount of time. I have 3 to 5 minutes in a segment to express myself. However, if you catch me lecturing at the School of Business and an executive MBA program, I get to be a little more loose and express myself because I'm in a room of people who understand what I'm saying and we have shared experiences.
Right.
And so I think that a lot of my education and my experiences have prepared me to adequately communicate messages that I want the world to know about the Black experience, but particularly the experience of African American women in corporate America, business, and in politics.
That's powerful. That's truly powerful. And just to expound on that just a little bit, because you've done everything from having to speak in those 3 to 5 minute sound bites and talk nothing but, policy and politics. But then also you've experienced and had the opportunity in a journalistic fashion to even be an editor of
magazine,
tabloid culture.
A lot of people don't know that I was the one of the West Coast editors of OK Magazine, and Reality TV Weekly, and several other publications. But when I came,
you got to see the inside and the darkness and the lies and the manipulation in that world. How much different is the political realm and the tabloid media? How different are those two worlds?
God, that's such an incredible question, and an important question, particularly with the relationship between President Donald Trump and a company called AMI, which owns
the Inquirer,
all
of these different. A lot of people don't know that.
And so when you're in the grocery store, and I was in the grocery store just last week, and there was this big cover story about how wonderful Melania Trump was.
Wonder why.
Who published this? Oh, Donald Trump's best friend published it. The power is that the media is able to manipulate and influence people, the consumers, which is why it's so important for us to have our own platforms like Essence and Jed and that sort of thing, Black Enterprise, so that we can tell our own stories. But I was surprised that the whole newsstand in the grocery store was pro-Trump, because his best friend owns all of those. So the behind the scenes of AMI while I was there was just being shocked at how effective they manipulate the stories that you see, the angles, how they frame the story.
But that's government as well.
But people believe it, Nick. They believe what they read.
They
and
believe
it breaks
everything.
my heart that they read something and go, well, Nick Cannon did XYZ, and they never go below the surface to get the real story.
Oh, no, it's only headline culture.
Oh, yes.
So, and in saying that, and just, just a little bit of background of even how the position came across for you, and I learned this in the book as well, but it was the influence of Donald Trump, because unfortunately you even talked about the passing of your brother, but the Inquirer did a nasty thing and said that they had an exclusive interview with you at your brother's funeral, which was a complete lie.
It was the eulogy I gave for my brother, and they took quotes from the eulogy and put it on the cover of the Inquirer as if they were interviewing me. And so I filed a multi-million-dollar lawsuit.
As you should.
Against the Inquirer. And in the middle of this situation, Donald Trump calls me. He goes, my friend owns the Inquirer. You've got him over a barrel, but can we work something out? And I'm like, absolutely not. And he's like, if you fight them, you'll be fighting them forever.
Right.
Which was true if you think about it.
Yeah.
You start fighting them. He said, but let's look at some other opportunities. They own 30 plus magazines. Maybe there's something positive you can do. So the long story short.
Smart business move.
Well, it was smart because I was able to impact messaging from the inside out. Certainly, I could have stood outside of AMI throwing rocks at the window and yelling at the top of my lungs.
They got some big lawyers over there, and they're used to fighting these type of cases.
But being on the inside, Nick, gave me the ability to understand how deceptive the system was and how to use it to my advantage.
I love where you're going. So speaking of being on the inside and deception, not only were you on the inside there, but you're in the inside of the White House and in this administration. And there's a lot of things, like even you touch on it in the book. And even, we see from the outside to where being, if I maybe I'm wrong, but the only person of our culture even in that administration.
Yeah, I was the only African-American senior staff at the White House. So when I looked around the table every morning at senior staff, 30 senior staff members, I was the only African-American, not just African-American woman, but African-American in the room. Period.
And then you were no longer, at first they said you resigned, then they said you were fired.
That about everybody. He just said that about Mathis, General Mathis, who I adore. He said Mathis, resigned, and then when he got mad at Mathis, he said that General Mathis was fired.
Right.
This is kind of his MO. But I think one of the most important things that we have to understand about politics is that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu.
Say that again.
It's just
that is one of the quotes that have stood out in your statements before. You say it in the book. If you are not at the table, you're on the menu.
Because guess what they're cutting? They're cutting fundings for affordable housing, education, civil rights.
And you were the only person
policing.
at the table for us.
Yes, but all while I was at the table, I had a whole group of haters who were like, we don't like her because she's sitting there, and why is she there, and we don't need anybody in the room. And I would be like, really? You think you don't need anyone?
So let's talk about that, because that is something even that I struggle with. Not with you specifically, but even I have a problem with government all the way.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like this administration is kind of really the magnifying glass of what's wrong with government. Right. Just because it truly is a facade, and even at the table, what is truly being discussed. But if there are real changes that can occur and aren't just, this puppetry that's really going on, and what effective policy should we be paying attention to, and how and why do we make it so personal when we see one of ours trying to evoke change?
One of the most important things that I did while I was in the White House was the budget negotiations. And that's the line item for everything from healthcare to housing. But there was an opportunity because, most of our funding here at Howard University comes from the federal government.
Yes.
For me to go and negotiate specifically Howard University's budget from the federal government.
Right.
To which, Betsy DeVos wanted to cut.
Right.
And so I'm having this intense negotiation with Mick Mulvaney, the head of our budget office, saying, look, you don't have to give us more if that's your position, but don't cut us.
Right.
We can't afford a loss. I was negotiating for a 7% increase, and I was successful at getting them to cut nothing.
Right.
While they were cutting all the other federally funded institutions.
So all you Howard University students, Omarosa was in there talking for us, making sure that they didn't cut. But see, and it's the picture is painted quite often that. And even, like I said, I'm probably one of those people that champion it loud that this government, this system, none of these things are actually ever going to help us. The whole purpose for the system is to keep us enslaved, keep the mentality low, keep us distracted, while the elite are up and really running in all for their favor.
True statement.
How true is that? A true statement?
True statement, but if not us, then who? And if not now, then when?
Right.
When do we start to affect change in a system that is intrinsically corrupt? We have
But
to have
if we're
someone
the
who's
what are,
bold enough to go in and say,
if we're the hamsters on the wheel, though, why?
no, well,
Like,
when you say hamster on the wheel, the one thing is politics isn't going to change. There's going to be a budget passed every single year
right,
that's going to have trillions and trillions of dollars that will impact Black and brown children all over the country,
Right.
their education, their safety, their housing, that sort of thing, and their health care. The question is, who's willing to go and fight for those children? Who's willing to go and have a meeting with, Betsy DeVos, who is, I don't pull any
you
punches.
definitely
with her
don't
in the
pull no
book.
punches.
But somebody's got to go and talk to her because she doesn't see the value of public education. She wants to cut funding. She doesn't appreciate our children, and she has
And probably should have never got the job in the first
never
place.
but still, even with me saying all of that, somebody has to be willing to go and talk to Betsy DeVos. Now, I'm not advocating for people who don't understand politics to suddenly jump in,
Right.
because I understand that it's complicated. I've been doing it since I went in 1997.
With Gore, right?
With 20 years I've been in this, but
Which people don't know.
they don't, and it's okay
Yeah.
because it's my responsibility to tell my own story. But I will say this: whether it's your PTA, whether it's your city council, whether you're running for mayor or tax collector, we need you. We need every single one of the folks who are watching this to find a way to serve their community. We need people who are willing to go take the bumps and the bruises and the criticism.
And you believe that real change can
Absolutely.
actually occur.
Absolutely.
Even though you were the only person at the table.
Yeah, because I'm
and
not
they,
scared.
and
Fear is not something that, that I've ever embraced, nor did God give us the spirit of fear. I recognize that God had a divine plan for my life.
Right.
I mean, you can't make up that I was on a reality show with some weird man with crazy hair and he becomes the president of the United States.
You can't make that
has
up.
to be something that the divinity somehow came together and say, this is what's going to happen. So I trust God's plan for my life. But more importantly, I have seen in my own hometown of Youngstown, Ohio, somebody that I went to high school with is now the mayor, Tito Brown.
Right.
And he is fighting for a community that I grew up in.
Right.
And it's somebody that looks like me, that went to school with me, who's at the helm, who's the mayor of my hometown. A Black man is the head of Youngstown, Ohio.
Right.
That's remarkable. And it's
Right.
also important because children become what they see.
Facts. I'll agree with you on that, and I'll touch on two things. Even you speak on it in the book, though, when we talk about politics, and you say that ultimately it is just about money.
Oh, yeah.
And so,
Well, who's getting it and who's not
and
getting
who's
it?
getting it, who's not getting it.
So is Chicago getting the funding it needs to improve the conditions in on the south side? Is Detroit getting the money that it needs? Is Flint getting the funding that it needs to clean up the water system?
Definitely
When we
not.
go into Alabama and Louisiana, are we actually helping to fight poverty? All of that is federal funding, federal dollars that we must go fight for
Right.
every single budget year.
Right. And is that the first thing? Like, because it's almost like maybe it's about mindset before money. And then that brings me to the next question that I had.
Policy drives money.
Right.
It drives.
But I mean, see, even more so in our community.
Oh yes.
And then policy, and then to the money. But that, because you touched on the haters, and being the only person at the table, when I'm sure there was so much on the menu, but we didn't support you in a way that as a community really should have. From the ideas, like you said, there were haters saying, why is she in there? Or she's pro-Trump, or she's, and not understanding or seeing the benefit of one of our own being at the table. You were ridiculed.
Well,
You-
let me just take some
Yeah.
responsibility because my style isn't for everybody.
Okay.
You know what I mean? Like,
that's to be commended.
I'm hardcore.
Right.
I'm never going to approach anything passive. And so my approach of negotiating policy and budgetary issues and changes in the community, in hindsight, I can look and see that I probably needed some political finesse. But yet, I'm rough around the edges. I recognize that,
Right.
But I did need help. And I asked for help specifically from civil rights leaders, African-American groups, economists, people who could help structure policy that would benefit us. And because Trump is so toxic, and rightfully so, they decided not to assist. But those same people are now giving interviews saying, we have no one there.
Right.
And look how white his White House is. And what are
Right.
we going to do when they had someone there that they could have supported? But because of circumstances, they didn't. I don't bemoan anyone for that.
Right.
But I
that's
will.
that's an interesting one, because even at the time when it was going down, and from Kanye to Steve Harvey to saw all of these people, and even I was like, I don't want to talk to nobody even it related to Trump. Like, I don't like, just because one, I saw how our community like reacted to anyone who were just having a conversation.
Yeah, they want you to pay a price.
But because there is a lot of puppetry going on, and we've seen it up close to where the manipulation is so powerful that even being in his presence, just from one tweet, like he can just shift the whole, like the
He
energy.
has exploited people.
He's
He
the
has
master
exploit-
manipulator. I
he
commend
is
him
an
in that sense.
He has exploited people. But then you look at what Van Jones, when he teamed up with Kim Kardashian, when it comes to criminal justice reform,
Which
you
is
can
to be
say whatever
commended.
you want to say about,
Absolutely.
photo ops and this and sort. I mean, they were able to get a woman who was sentenced to a very long sentence released.
Right.
They were able to pass criminal justice reform that we've been trying to pass since the criminal justice reform that was passed during the Clinton
Right.
administration. So,
Is there
it's
any underlining methods or just that, like, is that all just how we see it? Just that's true to what it is? Because when I see it, even like, I may not be a fan of this administration or even of politics in general, but when I see exactly what you said, I have to commend that. I have to. So
it's hard because if you go near Trump, all of his toxicity
right.
gets on you. People
Right.
will make you pay a price. They
Right.
want to punish you. They want to, kick you out of the cookout or whatever
Right.
it is that they say.
Right.
Take your black card because you're trying to fight.
She's no longer invited.
Right,
She
right,
canceled.
Right. But you have to. But you can't. You have to decide that you're going to be able to withstand and be strong enough to withstand that type of criticism. I have never been concerned about what people think about me.
Where do
Only
you get
person-
that from?
From my mother. I watched my
heard
mother
that.
after
Another
my father
queen.
was killed. My mother raised 4 children. She could care less if we had to go to the food bank, if we
Right.
had to go and stand in the food line.
It was
she
about
didn't care
family.
about what people were saying. I have to feed my
Somebody's
children.
got to feed my kids.
And at this point, we have to get beyond being so completely ignorant about how powerful we are. We are so incredibly
Say
powerful.
that again.
But we have to be powerful by being united instead of dividing each other.
And that's ultimately what I was talking about, of like changing the mindsets before we get to the money.
Yeah.
And it's unfortunate because we allow the media and just even the society in itself to perpetuate and put this perception of who we are as black people, and the fact that they prey on our self-hate.
They do.
And
Because some of the attacks that came from African Americans that I respected, I was blindsided by it. Spike Lee is an example. I had a
that's my
chance
guy.
to talk to Spike
That's my guy.
after, but when we were going through it and he
Yeah.
was sending out those tweets and calling me names and using
yeah,
derogatory slurs, I was like, wait a minute.
yeah. I don't know if you caught wind of it, but when the dog comment was made, and that's kind of when I really started to jump in and be quite vocal and even do my research and really start to understand who you were. I was livid, you know what I mean? And just the fact that it was the media and like I saw the comment everywhere, and it was like the fact that our president can call a black woman a dog and nobody at all wanted to. That's not racist, or that's not like. And I would literally get into full on debates with even people of our. She is. I'm like, yo, how that?
Yeah.
What is that? I'm a father. I have a daughter. That this man could call a woman of our culture a dog, and there's no repercussions whatsoever. You know, and it was careless. It was handled in such a way. And like you said, I even saw some people that I wanted to stand up, and I felt like I was kind of one of the only ones. They're like, "Yo, why?" And they were like, "Oh, but it's just Omarosa.
Right.
She was in there." Like,
But, there's a saying Malcolm X said that the most disrespected women in the world are black
women, absolutely.
Because people allow black women to get insulted and assaulted without defending and recognizing their value.
That is no one else's fault but our own.
Yeah.
And in today's culture, and for many reasons, and like I said, I'll take full blame for whether from the entertainment side of the culture, but I don't see that. Even like I always say, women across the world for ages have been treated as second-class citizens, but there was a time where we just stopped taking pride in our queens, and it's very easy to get back to it. And like I said, I'll be one of the first to say I take blame in that idea from everything from appearance to complexion to, how we treat each other. And it is something that has been embedded, but we can break it. We can break the
But I'm
cycle.
also watching what's happening in this political race for president with one of our own. Kamala Harris is
Right.
running for president. Let me
Right.
just say that again.
Say
There
it again.
is a bison who's running to be president of the United States, African American female, sharp.
Right.
But then you look at the
And they
money
want to take.
that-
They want to say she's not even African American at times.
that stuff drives me crazy. But then you see Beto gets in the race. He raised records amount of money, and then we sit back and we have to be just as clever in this political thing. We have to support our sisters. We have to support our candidates,
it's-
even if she's not your cup
They're
of tea.
saying it is politics.
There's a black woman running for president,
And then they also, because on the other side they want to bring up how many black men she was responsible for locking up.
oh,
And
Nick is.
I'm just we got to talk about every side of it.
Nick, you are okay.
So-
I was first of all, Senator Harris. I was not trying to set up an alley-oop.
Definitely
Her
not that
record
because
is important for us to digest,
Right.
But I'm certainly not going to be critical only of that aspect.
and the only reason why I bring that up is because you do have to have a full scope of it
Yes.
when dealing in politics.
That's
because
true.
because a lot of things are on certain things are only highlighted, and whether it's the Clinton administration, which we all know the travesties that went on during that process, from the super predators to the life sentences and all of those things,
Right.
all the way to even the Obama administration, where as a community we often only want to focus on the problems. And even like the conversation that we had about you being at the table, we only want to look like, well, this isn't for us. They can't help us anyway. So let's just highlight the negative things and not highlight the fact that if President Harris were to
can
walk across
happen.
that stage, what that would mean for our young black women in the world.
Yeah.
So
But I want to believe in America where Kamala Harris, Senator Harris, could in fact be sworn in as the 46th
is that
president
realistic?
of yes.
Is
it
that realistic?
If Donald Trump, a reality
Oh,
star
right.
who's inept, can become
Facts.
president of the United States, then a
Point.
sharp, well-educated, well-spoken, brilliant black woman can become president as well.
I want to be as optimistic as you. I truly do. But again, like, I have lost faith in the political system, and that's why I was so intrigued to read your book as well as sit down with you, because I am one of those voices. I'm one of those voices that'll rock a turban, put my fist in the air, and be like, F the government and its white supremacy, and I have a lot of statistics and research to back all of that. But to have a discussion with someone who's on the inside and is one of us, from the HBCUs, from Howard University to the faith community,
But you've
entertainment.
taken the time to learn. I mean, you're dropping stats and policy and quotes that cross the gamut. You've taken the time to
Right.
come to understand those policies and to learn all the things that are going behind the scenes. The people who tend to attack or be critical are people who haven't taken the time to understand, to research, or to learn what the true process is.
Right.
But I'm going to say it again. We need our brothers and sisters to get into the system, to run for office, to be the change. And I know you're a little cynical, but change happens from the inside out, Nick.
Really?
Yes. I
Change-
believe in protest. I believe in marching.
But even
but I also-
America wasn't started from the inside out. People had to leave to come to a whole and steal a whole new land and
That's so
start.
true.
You know what I mean? It wasn't.
That's true.
They didn't figure it out within, and that's I definitely come from the Garveyism
You are so
mentality
gangster.
to be like, yo, we need to go start our own, but. But before we can do that, we got to start our own within our mindsets. I'm a true
true.
believer in that, and I know it's probably going to take a couple of generations for that to occur. So I'm going to operate within the system and learn
your
as much
daughter
about
or
the
your
system.
sons could become president. That's the
Absolutely.
beauty of this country. Even as dark and distorted sometimes that it is, the beauty is that America offers itself to where Barack Obama can become president or your children can become president.
Right.
But we have to
Or
learn.
Kamala Harris.
Or Senator Harris. Yes.
And so someone who is at one point, you actually, I'm not sure, maybe you were a part of Hillary's campaign for presidency. You were in the White House with Gore. from every side. I would say a bipartisan approach from, like, you've seen the Republicans, you've seen the Democrats. 2020. What's the reality of it in your opinion? Like,
the reality is that if we do not mobilize, then there's a good chance that if Donald Trump is not impeached, he'll be reelected.
and
We can't sit this one out.
you hit on two topics, because it's a great segue, but I think they said the percentage of presidents not doing 2 terms is like
Very low.
extremely low,
Yeah.
especially in our generation. I mean, the first George Bush only did 1, and that's because Ross Perot screwed that up.
Right.
Carter.
He's also raised more money. I mean, Donald Trump has already raised $300-400 million for his
the
reelection.
likelihood is the sisters, like, Trump's probably gonna be president.
No. Because the X factor is us.
Who is
That's
us?
the X factor. You and I.
the people that
X
don't
factor.
matter.
No. The X factor is that with a viable candidate, then he can be defeated. But everybody has to turn out. Let's review.
Who?
Voter turnout in our community was low. There was no enthusiasm because Barack Obama wasn't on the ballot.
Right.
We didn't
But it
really
didn't
have
matter.
the organization or the mobilization to turn out the numbers. But it is critical. It's imperative that we turn
You
out.
really believe that? I see the
Yes,
passion.
because I am a believer.
But you were in the
that-
inside. You
that
saw all the
justice
BS.
Will always lean towards
All right,
the
Dr. King.
positive, the right.
I see where you go. The arc of justice
I can't
is
take 4
long,
more
but
years.
it leads towards.
Let me be clear. I can't take 4 more years
Right.
of Donald Trump.
I don't think anyone
The
can,
black
but it's a
community
facade.
can't afford 4 more years.
So what do we do?
We have to organize behind a candidate that can get elected and beat Donald Trump. Whether that's Cory Booker, whether that's Kamala Harris, whether that's Beto, whether that's Biden, whether that's Bernie Sanders, we have to find a candidate and unite behind that candidate and turn out the vote. As simple as that.
Simple as that.
GOTV.
Really?
Get out the vote, raise the money, get the message out.
Really?
Yes.
And that's gonna stop this machine of this man who's already raised more money than anyone.
Yes.
Has his side on lock.
Yes.
They love him.
Yes.
And you, all right.
I'm not giving up hope.
Okay.
I am not, because I
don't
can't
wanna
do
be
4 more years.
Like you said, I don't want to be cynical, but again, I feel like this administration is a fine example of the elite in control
We
and how
can't
they
sit
can.
this one out. We can't afford to. It's too important for our children. It's too important for the students who are sitting here listening to this. It's too important for generations to come.
Now, one thing that you said, because this is what I do need to do more research on and have more understanding. You said if we don't get out to vote or Donald Trump isn't impeached, the word impeach from everything from, if you go back to Nixon to Clinton, it's very foggy and cloudy for me. What is impeached?
Well, so the great thing about how our forefathers set up this country is that
Not my forefathers.
No. When
They forefathers.
Dr. Carr, you ain't tell me he was demilitarized. You set me up. You set me up.
Them ain't,
Candace's class is in session.
them ain't my forefathers. But I hear you. Continue.
Embedded in our Constitution is this ability to impeach. There are 2 elements. One, there's the 25th Amendment that means that if a president can't.
Professors.
Oh,
Keep going.
We are in a real university. Learning is happening. The 25th Amendment allows that if the president of the United States cannot fulfill the duties of the office, then he can, in fact, be removed. That's
Right.
the first. The other element is articles of impeachment can be introduced by Congress, voted on by the House, and then, of course, ratified in the Senate. And that's what we're looking at: high crimes and misdemeanors. Now, we know that Donald Trump is a criminal. He's a fraud.
Big
he's a
criminal.
scammer. And he's
His
already
whole squad that already went down.
And so, once the Mueller report is released,
Which is upon us.
it's upon us, and we see if, in fact, he has committed high crimes and misdemeanors,
Which we know he has.
then the process of impeachment articles will be introduced, and the process will begin.
How
It
do
is
you-
a long process.
How do you dethrone the king?
Well, I saw it happen. I was in the Clinton administration during Clinton's impeachment, something that we thought was not even plausible because
And
he
he-
was so popular.
And that was so confusing to me because they were like, all right, he got impeached, but nothing happened.
well, because he was impeached in the House and then not in the Senate. I mean,
So then he wasn't impeached.
He was impeached.
but it didn't nothing happen to him.
But he wasn't removed. There's a
Right.
difference.
So that's probably what's going to happen to Donald Trump, and he's going to be
Well,
president
because
for
of
4
the
more
power
years.
structure, because the Democrats control the House and
Right.
not the Senate. But it still is a mark on his record of who he is as a president, a failed president, someone who has scammed this country. I mean, he scammed me. I just learned that the man isn't even a billionaire. He's only worth $700 million.
Yeah.
He defrauded banks
You
and financial
we
institutions.
can see that. He done went bankrupt mad times.
I was when I
You was
signed up
on
for The
Apprentice.
Apprentice.
You knew he wasn't no billionaire.
Listen, when I signed up on The Apprentice in 2004, I had no idea what
Really?
they were selling back then. Everybody was watching The Apprentice
Yeah.
back then because we bought the facade. Like you said, it's all an illusion. It's all a facade.
Yeah.
But if, in fact, that report shows that he committed high crimes and misdemeanors, he will be impeached.
Now impeached in like going to jail, or just like Clinton, where
I believe that
it's,
he
it's
will
a
end
mark
up-
on his record and he get to run
No,
the country.
I believe he'll go to jail. I mean, some of the things that have
and you were
come
right
out.
there. You were close
Yeah,
to
but I
it.
didn't know they were all. I mean, some of them were criminals, like Manafort. I
Yeah.
sat at tables and meetings with Manafort, Flynn, General. I mean, my God, these men were
Criminals.
scamming millions and millions of dollars.
That's
and
that's politics.
working
though.
with Russians and foreign entities to undermine our democracy. And there I was, the little brown girl sitting there with these crazy people. Let me just tell you, sometimes God moves you out of situations. Thank you, Jesus.
Testify. Come on,
moves
somebody.
you when he needs to move you, because I am thankful every single day to be liberated from that experience, but I'm grateful for the lessons.
All right.
I
So
will never forget the lessons.
so how openly, how freely can we talk about that?
About my lessons?
No, about the whole process of the removal, because like you, in the book, you speak very openly about your beliefs of what you think are some of the reasons that you may have been asked to resign, or
Well, no, it was very vocal after Charlottesville. I mean, it was something I was very vocal about. After Charlottesville,
You had to go.
I was very clear that
But you
I'm
could-
doing one
you-
year, but I had to find someone. My quest was to find someone to continue the work that I started.
Right.
I could have just threw up my hands and quit, but there were so many things that I had already started that were important.
Right.
That the work needed to carry on, that I couldn't just peace out and leave without having a succession plan in place.
So you tell me that the whole process, you know what, Donald Trump over a decade worked with him so many times, and you saw so many things, and I mean even in your book you speak of a lot of allegations and just things of like how he dealt with women and just his behavior, which was just unacceptable on many different occasions. But one thing you did say early on, or that I've heard you say, that early on you didn't see him as a racist.
No, because first of all, the Donald
Clearly
Trump
a
of 04. No, but when 28 million people were tuning in to The Apprentice, they weren't
I
tuning
still
in to
like
see
he's
the racist.
I thought he was a racist. I was thinking Donald Trump was a racist since the beginning, but
Because he has a third eye. That's why.
yeah, but
His third eye is
but
much
I mean,
more
when
in tune.
he's when I think of what racism actually is, when the
But can
idea
we
to
go back to
oppress
04?
others and him being the elitist and his idea, like that's why he's the president, because he's the person for the people who actually share the same beliefs. He's the epitome of what I
Yes,
want to
he
be.
is
I
a
can put my
racist.
name on everything and control.
But you're asking me
the-
why I didn't see it.
How you didn't see that man was a racist?
Hindsight is 2020. Sure, I
Really?
could sit here and say
Or was
this,
it more
this.
because you knew that they were like we all do when I've worked for racists before. I've worked for racist
Give us an
institutes.
example. Spill
NBC.
this. Spill the beans. Ooh! Wait, time out.
I said it. No. But I got fired before those things before. But those
You
are
know,
my.
I was with NBC for almost 12
I
years.
made millions and millions of dollars with NBC.
I
but
did too.
Because of
full disclosure, I did too.
But because when I got called to the table for making statements, you know what I mean?
remember your statements.
Yeah.
I was there when you said it.
But that, and that's my own merit. I mean, I share.
But this is the boss part of you. When you made those statements, they still gave you an opportunity to stay. And you're like, no, I'm holding on to my principles and I'm leaving. I
Right.
remember because I was a part of the NBC family when you were going through that.
Absolutely. And then, a lot of those people that, made those statements are no longer there. Some of them still are there. And I don't think they're a bad organization. And even when I call organizations and peoples and institutions racist, I'm talking about the infrastructure.
I have worked for so many men and women who are of power, who are racist.
Yes.
If I decided that I wanted to work in a racist-free environment, I would not have a job. Every
Talk about it.
every corporation has
Unless
some
you at
element.
Howard University.
But yes, but
Which you are
in the
professor.
DNA of these organizations. These are organizations that did not admit African Americans. These are universities. There are corporations that didn't hire African Americans, and so
Because it's a
that
racist
ism is
institution.
in the DNA of those organizations, and yet we have to go into those organizations in corporate America, into Wall Street, into education, into entertainment.
So you're making my point for
we
me.
have to navigate those seas.
You're making my point for me to say, like, it's not that you didn't see that Donald Trump was a racist, but you saw that you could benefit within his system.
I'm
even
going to
though
stand by my statement.
he
In
was a racist.
04, I had no idea. In 04, now in 2019, I can tell you very clearly.
But you didn't see that man
Nick,
was a racist.
I'm about to push back on
All
you.
right, go for
Because
it.
you worked with R. Kelly. Did you know that he
And
exploited children
let's
when
talk
you
about
worked
that.
with him?
100%. Because
now you want to pull
no, but
punches. It's getting hot in Cannon
but
class.
that's exactly. And
Did you
I
know
made
back
this-
then when you worked with R. Kelly?
I turned a blind eye, and
Wow.
I said that because I
Wow.
didn't want to believe it,
Wow.
and because I was thinking this great artist can help benefit my career, so I didn't look deep into it. If I would, when the tapes and the allegations were out there, I asked him. He said, "Man, nah, that ain't me." Da da da, and I took his word for it.
And I asked Donald Trump, are you
Are you
racist? Have you,
racist?
no, I did. I talked about it in the book. Are you racist? Have you ever said these things? I asked him to his face, and he said no in the same way. Now, did I turn a blind eye? Possibly, because I've had a chance to reflect.
I can admit
I've
it.
had a chance to
I've
reflect.
turned a
I've
blind
missed
eye.
the big red flags. But here, and I also worked for Bill Cosby. I don't know if you know
Yeah,
this.
you got for him and his wife Camille, right?
Dr. Cosby, Camille Cosby is incredible. I don't put the sins of her husband on her, but I worked for Bill Cosby, and at a time when now I have to reflect. Did I
Yeah.
see the signs? But wow, it's hot up in here.
But this is, I mean,
Founders Library is hot.
it's so hot in here. It's getting real hot in here in Cannon's class. But
Wow.
we talking about some serious stuff, and you talk about one of the things that just I sat down and read the book from beginning to end just because the first page I opened it, I was locked in because you talked about the N-word tapes. Someone who was at NBC who heard about the N-word. And that's one of the ways I was like, man, there's no way he's going to be president because those tapes from the printers are going to come out, and then that's going to
And
shut
there is a
everything down.
whole machine. I get asked, there's not a day that doesn't go by that says, why haven't you released him? There is a whole machine that's protecting Donald Trump and keeping the release of, because they sat on, let's be clear,
Right.
they sat on the Access Hollywood tape for years.
Yeah, they did.
And they waited right before the election and dropped Access Hollywood.
So why, in
Let's
your
think
opinion,
about how
yeah.
lascivious that is.
In your opinion, because the word nigga is very in our society looked at as it's polarizing in so many different ways. And we give it so much power. One of the reasons why I'm no longer working with NBC is over that word.
Wow.
Is because I said I said NBC stands for nigga be careful. And it was true. But we give that word so much power that we feel like there's an entire conspiracy about the president of the United States.
Yeah,
that
but here's the difference. The rumors, as it's been told to me, is that he was talking about me and Kwame during the taping of that first season.
So when he's calling whoever he's calling a nigger, he was talking about you and Kwame from the first season.
That was what I told. So I actually flew out to meet with a producer who worked on the season of the show, who had, because there's tons of tapes.
Right.
People think there's just one tape. There's tons of tape of him
And then
saying
for people who
misogynist-
don't know, when you're taping a reality show specifically, you have a microphone on. They call cut on the cameras or whatever, but the cameras are still
Keep on
rolling.
rolling.
And Donald Trump is one of those people who just speaks freely,
That's
whether
right.
he's backstage or whatever. And this is where they feel like the conversations were being held about you,
Right.
with these derogatory terms.
And one of the supposed recordings that I heard that this producer allowed me to hear was a grainy, really bad copy of him, which we believe him referring to Kwame, because he
Kwame.
was using the male kind of past tense. And so, that revelation made me go, this is it.
And you heard this.
I heard it.
You heard him say
and I'm like,
because I always heard about the tapes, and I said that he said it on multiple occasions, but you actually heard it.
I had an opportunity to hear, and the person who allowed me to hear it wanted me to know because he thought it was important for me in telling my story that this wasn't just some fantasy. You know, maybe it's out there, maybe it's not. But my question is, there has to be hours and hundreds of hours of Donald Trump being Donald Trump, racist, misogynist, bigot. And why won't they release the tapes? I don't have the power. I'd like to think I'm much more powerful to go up against them. Believe me, I've tried. As you know, I'm in the middle of a lawsuit right now with the President of the United States.
Right.
But somehow, some way, I believe that they'll become public.
And then you speak in the book, it was fascinating to me that they pulled you into the Situation Room.
Yeah.
Like the top secret room, just you and was it
John
Kelly
and White House lawyers. And outside of that room, just to paint a picture, because people were like, why didn't you just leave? Are armed guards
right.
with machine guns.
Right.
And by the way, you don't just walk out of the Situation Room.
And held you against your will, really.
Yes, you get buzzed in and buzzed out. You don't just decide to get up, meeting's over, I'm out.
Right.
You have to stand there while they buzz you out of the most secure room in the world.
Right.
So the question becomes, why was it so important for them to carry out what they did with me in the Situation Room? And then to try and go and lie and say, well, actually,
it's about a car service.
A car service, right? Which is,
Come on now.
I mean, I live 6 blocks from the White House. So I don't really need a car service. But at any rate, I think that it tells a story that they were extremely.
But it talks about, again, elitism. It talks about that. And the fact that, from my understanding, this was even above Donald Trump.
Yeah, because you hear the recording. Well, it depends on what you believe. You hear the recording of him saying, I'm not happy about you leaving. I didn't know it happened. You know, that was one of the things that I shared, was him in his own voice saying, I wasn't a part of this. I wasn't, I didn't authorize this.
The president is an institution, not a person.
That's right.
And knowing all of this, but the individual, we have established that he is a racist, a bigot, a misogynist, all of those things.
Indeed.
But even there are powers above him.
That's right.
That control what he's allowed to do. And he seems like somewhat of a loose cannon and a maverick.
But there's a power that's over all of that, and that's Christ. That's the power.
Oh, okay, church. Come on now.
It's true. It's true. I am not. The reason I don't fear Donald Trump
because of Christ consciousness, the power
within
within
me
you.
All the way from Westlake Projects, he's not going to leave me right now.
Say that.
He wasn't going to abandon me in the Situation Room
I
after
like
all
the
the things I went over.
I like.
But you were talking about
I like
power.
the spiritual spin you just put on this. I'm going to go ahead. I commend you on that.
Dr. Carr, help us out.
But you know what? You bring up a great point.
Nah,
you bring up a good point because we're having a good time, but we're also learning. And you say some powerful things in this book. You've said some powerful things just in this discussion. But credibility is something that I feel like people have attacked you for no reason, because I say out of fear of what you actually can share and do know, and almost so that they tried to take the credibility from your best-selling book.
They tried, but then it went to number 1.
Right. Still went to number 1. Bars. But what is it about? Really, they say our character, our name. These are the only things that we actually do have control over.
But I have always spoken truth to power. Like if you've ever met me.
So why do they say don't believe her? She's lying. She's making all this stuff up. There is no N-word tape. She didn't get fired the way that they said it is. Donald Trump is the nicest man ever.
Because the only thing they can do is to attack credibility. I mean, I came with receipts. When I told my story, when I wrote my book, I backed every single thing up.
Right.
With documents, recordings, tapes, videos. And even with that, the credibility of a black woman is questioned, even when I have a mountain of evidence about everything I'm saying, because credibility is so fragile. It is something that, they can attack and people will say, yeah, she's not credible. I kept hearing people say that. I'm saying, just point to one thing that was not true that I stated. I said the man was mentally unhinged, and he displays that every day.
Right.
I talk about his criminality. I talk about them trying to bribe me after I left the White House.
To have you come work for the 2020 campaign.
That's right. For $15,000 a month just to be quiet, and I didn't have to go into an office. But that's the Trump crime family. But the thing that they fear is someone who's willing to speak truth to power. I'm going to do that every day, all day, without any
That's
apologies or
amazing.
regrets.
So how can we support you more?
Well, I think that, the first thing is that we have to be able to come together and have discussions without attacking each other. I like to have
True
logical,
discourse.
educated, informed discussions as opposed to what I see. I hate to see the back and forth that's just not constructive.
Right.
Name calling. I mean, I know you're on the receiving end of it.
Yeah, but and it's to me, I always tell people that's why I don't do a lot of the CNN and Fox News stuff, because it's like those are just people just trying to show how smart they are, get their point. No one's actually really looking for a solution.
Yes.
I'd rather not. If you catch me in the field doing work, and I will share my statements or in a forum like this where I feel like it's, it's a true purpose of education, but I don't want to just go sit around for someone else's soundbite and for someone else's ratings.
Right.
So but you're in that world quite often too, and I feel like you're owed the respect and at least the support of our community, or at least the full story to be told.
And that's all I want.
Right.
Is for people to take the time and to hear my side of the story as opposed to what people are saying about me. Because I
Right.
hear a lot of people talking about Omarosa, but to
Right.
get the true story, and I thank you for taking the time to read the book and to understand my life story. I think that's important, that we have to listen more than we attack. But also, I thank everyone that bought the book. The paperback is coming out. Continue to support it. I'm continuing to do the lecture tour, the speaking tour. I will continue to teach as often as I can. But more importantly, I think that we need to uplift each other instead of
Absolutely.
tearing each other down.
No, and speaking in that, because I know you're pressed for time, so I could talk to you for hours and hours. But you talked about how they fear you, and then, like I said, we owe you the support as much as possible. But are you concerned or have any fears about being so unapologetic in the things that you do, and the fact that you're kind of out there by yourself, and that's...
Well, I have a lot more support than I initially thought. When I first came out, I thought the whole world was against me. That's the impression you get when you hear all these false
Or
stories.
that's the picture they also want to paint.
They
because
wanna
They want to
paint.
make you. They want to exile you. They want to make from every side.
Yeah.
They want to make you look like the super villain.
But
as
there
you
are
say.
people who seek the truth.
Right.
And they want to operate from a point of departure that's filled with knowledge and not fake news.
Right.
And so that's totally different than what my real experience is. But I also think that here in this particular moment in history, you use your platform to educate and to uplift people. I will continue to use my platform to educate and uplift people. And if we continue to do that, we as a race can rise together.
There it is. And God has not given you a spirit of fear, but of love and a sound mind. And like I said, we could talk about so many things, from you being a reality star to a reverend. And going through the full seminary process, and even after having your
That's
your
my
master's.
true calling. I mean, that's what I do. My husband is the pastor of Mount Calvary Baptist Church in Jacksonville, and God sent me, just such a strong, intelligent, educated Black man who loves God, but he's also
You
a
so
little
lucky.
gangster.
You so lucky.
But what we do in our church and in the community is truly the substance of who I am in my life. And that's telling anyone that will listen about the sweetest thing that I know, which is the Word of God.
Right.
And that's really what my life's work is about.
And speaking on that, just in closing, knowing that your message of spirituality, but still being involved in the world of politics, entertainment. I always say entertainment, from what I see, is the den of iniquity. So it's a lot of demons, it's a lot of darkness, and I could only imagine that politics are even darker.
But you've taken the bull by his horns, and you know that content is king in entertainment.
Absolutely.
And so you're creating content that you can put out to the world. And you were talking about traveling the world and sharing that content. We have to create our own platforms to tell our stories.
But wait, hold on. How do we create our own content
doing it
and
right
entertainment? But when it comes to politics, we got to work within this system.
There needs to be a power shift. And
That's
we're a
all
part
I'm
of
saying.
that.
But that's what I'm saying. So in that same method, to where in entertainment
He's
we got to
never
take
letting me
we got to
leave.
take the bull by the horns. How do we take the bull by the horns in politics if we're operating at their system?
Listen,
We got to have that same message.
We saw fighters like King and Malcolm X and Marcus Garvey. We have seen in our
Carmichael,
history
Kwame.
people who have decided to go up against a system that they were told they could never defeat. We have seen a history of our people fighting against the greatest odds and still being successful. We wouldn't have Civil Rights Act if we didn't fight the fight. We wouldn't have had desegregation if we didn't fight the fight. We wouldn't have had the first black president if we didn't fight the fight.
Right.
And so I'm not going to become as cynical as you are, Nick Cannon. But I will say that we have to be in the fight. We've got to be in the ring. We can't just be on the side criticizing everybody who has the courage to get in there and fight the good fight.
Well, you know what? This has definitely been an intriguing conversation. Like I said,
it is intense. Y'all should have prepared me for Cannon's class. I think you set me up, Dr. Carr. No. You set me up. I've known him for 20 years. You set me up. No. I'm sweating. I need water.
Well, I mean, again, the book is amazing. This conversation has really been enlightening, and I support you. I mean, I supported you before this. And anytime, you know, I definitely want to be an ally and advocate to just show your strength and to show what you've done, you know, throughout your career as a black woman. And I commend you. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thanks for having me.
No doubt.
Cannon's class.
Yeah.